Hello, friends. I had to give a little Jim Nance love there, the legend. This is the PFF Forecast, the first ever PFF Analytics and Gambling podcast. I'm George. I'm going to be joined by Eric. You may remember us from the Lock of the Week that we do on the Pro podcast. Apparently, some things didn't work out so well. Our agents could not agree on a deal going forward. So they've relegated us to this dark corner of the universe and gave us our own podcast. So, Eric, it's just you and me. Think we can handle it? You ready?
Yeah, it's always fun to chat football and analytics and predictions with you. So we just get to do it in front of an audience ourselves now. One of the fun experiences of prepping for this was obviously like picking the name. And, it was the PFF3 cast for in honor of Dan Quinn for like a long time. And then money came in on the favorite. So then it became the PFF 3.5 cast. And then finally even more money came in on the favorite, and now it's the PFF Forecast, and I think we're pretty happy here. I think that this is where this is going to settle going into the weekend.
You think that's really funny, don't you? I hope that we can develop a model to predict the number of listeners that we lose every time you tell one of these really clever jokes. With that being said, now that we've lost you, we'll try and gain you back by selling you on this podcast, which I think is going to be really fun. It's one of the first times that we have this outlet to, I think, leverage PFF data in this way. It'll be pretty cool. Before we get there, I've been told that you're supposed to introduce yourself. Eric, I know a decent bit about you, but considering there are some other people listening, see if you can get the first impression rose here with your introduction.
Oh man, I think I'm more of a head-to-head player in fantasy, in DFS for Bachelor, but whereas you're probably more of a tournament guy. Yeah, so
accurate, very fair and accurate.
I like George. Graduated with a math degree, and because I was a sort of a nondescript blocking tight end in college, I went pro in something other than football and got a PhD in mathematics from the University of Nebraska. Since then, I've been a math professor, and for the last couple of years, I've helped in various ways for PFF, doing writing, data collection, and since January of last year, George, myself, Nathan Yankee, and others have been working on analytics projects, and this podcast is going to, be a lot of sort of dissemination of those kind of ideas, our hope is.
That was solid and safe. That was walking out of the limo and feeling so confident that you looked good enough to get a rose that you're like, I'm not going to take any chances. I'm not going to throw a joke out here. So B-, decent. Let me explain to you how it's done. Similarly, have a degree in math. I was so distraught by the state of our nation's math education system that I decided
right here
that I decided to give of myself. I did Teacher America. I taught on the East Coast for a couple of years. I taught back in California and South Central Los Angeles for a couple of years. Loved it. It was awesome. But I realized there was a greater challenge than teaching AP Calculus in Watts. And that was actually educating football fans about like math and how to think about football mathematically. All you have to do is go on Twitter to realize that that's the case. And so I joined PFF. I'd been a fan of PFF for a little while and started part-time like you did, Eric. Got hired full-time last year. I do a couple of different things, a couple of different parts of the company that I'm lucky enough to produce in. And this is easily one of the most exciting. It's been awesome this year and be pretty cool to share some of this stuff. So with that being said, let's jump into the first segment. We're going to try and make this segment-based, keep things moving along, not rambling, less of your math jokes. And the first segment that we're going to do is really what drives us to do analytics at PFF and what drives this podcast ultimately. And so, kind of why you should listen and what we're going to try and bring to the table. So I'm going to give it a try. Here we go. I think like basically every football fan out there, whether you work for a team, you're trying to keep yourself from losing your mortgage every Sunday, your goal is to better understand what helps teams win football games. And that's our goal as well. We want to know what best predicts a team winning a football game. And up to this point, there's been a lot of people out there that, will use trends, or worse off, their, 15 play sample size that they remember from the previous game to to make a prediction. And that, not surprisingly, does not work very well. And so our goal is to answer that question in a more rigorous way with math that we know to be good. And the great thing for us, and where I think this separates what we're doing here from, I think, anything else that you can get, is we are able to leverage the best data set out there, which is PFF's play-by-play, really detailed grade level data. It's really meticulously cared for and reviewed, and we know to be really sound and really predictive. And we're going to try and give some of that knowledge to everyone that's listening. What do you think?
Yeah.
Was that good?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, well said. I think
Yes.
The thing that PFF brings to the table is that there are previous things that have been hidden, right? So how good an offensive lineman is, right? Or how good a team is, blocking on kickoff return. And, and that is like the product of years of hard work, meticulous sort of constructive criticism given to us by teams and by other people. And what we're really doing here is we're standing on the shoulders of giants like, Neil Hornsby and the Chris Collinsworths and the people that have really put this thing together to say all this information is fantastic. It is the best data set in football. And what things from there can we take and extrapolate into making, positive expected value predictions, or better decision-making processes for teams, or just a more well-informed football fan. And what's really interesting is what we've seen over the last, I think, few years of like being in PFF or observing PFF from afar, is that you can know a lot of stuff about football, and if you know or weigh the wrong things, you can still make improper predictions. So,
or just look at coaches. I think that's a great example. But no, you're spot on there, and you don't even have to go to kick returns, right? Or special teams. Just look at throwing the ball, right? I mean, the way that if you haven't already, you should go check out the piece that Sam and Steve wrote about how we grade quarterback play, and just the level of detail and understanding that we can get about how well a quarterback plays compared to a lot of the other things that are out there is a huge advantage, because of course, as I think we'll talk about in a second, the importance of the passing game. But that's our goal. We're going to try and bring, whether you're just a really big fan of your football team and you want to be a better fan of your football team, whether you're building a football team or you're betting on a football team, I think we'll be able to provide some interesting stuff. Jokes notwithstanding, though.
Notwithstanding, for sure.
Notwithstanding. Okay, that was our intro. It was hopefully the only time that we do a lot of like talking at people that we can't even see. Next thing. Okay, this is going to be our first segment. I'm pretty excited about it. Eric, the new year just started. Do you have a New Year's resolution? I actually haven't asked you this. Do you have a New Year's resolution?
I generally don't.
Good.
But
Good. We'll stop there.
Okay.
I don't want to ruin. Right. I don't want to ruin my my good judgment of you. So everyone likes to have these New Year's resolutions, and it's a new year, new me. So I thought we'd do a segment called New Year, New Me, where we pick a football team and we give them a New Year's resolution that will help them be a newer and better team in the next year. Sound good?
It sounds great.
All right, here we go. So first one is, they're actually still in the playoffs, ironically, the Tennessee Titans. And in this new year, here's what they need to do. They need to run the ball less on second and long. So second and 6 or more. They run the ball about 50% of the time, just a shade under 50%, most in the NFL by about 4%, about 15% more than the league average. Eric, tell the people, why is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I think, we've said this, either on the internet or in our segments before, but like running the football is not only, not that predictive of winning, but it's also kind of a sucker play in many cases. So running the ball on average will yield a team a negative expected points added, so you're less likely to score after a run play than you were before a run play, whereas passing plays are a net positive generally. And it's not even that. It's that running the ball on 2nd and 7 or more, 6 or more, is going to dump like negative a quarter of a point each time you do that. So, while Mike Mularkey's shedding points in 2017-18, maybe his New Year's resolution should be, maybe, I don't know. Well, he's a thinner guy, but shedding pounds or something else, because running on 2nd and long should not be the thing that he's doing as his sort of like new year, new me thing.
Yeah, exotic would be the wrong word to use. The one thing that sticks out to me when we talk about it, and expected points are great, and if you're not, if that's something that doesn't make a lot of sense, we'll try and explain it as, kind of as we go, but I think you did a really nice job there. One of the things that I look at is, what is your percentage chance of getting a first down on that play? Because I hate going to 3rd down, right? One of the things that I love about the Rams offense is you kind of always have that feeling that they're going to try and gain, they're going to try and get that first down yardage well before a 3rd down. And running the ball just sets yourself up to deal with 3rd downs, at a much higher rate. When you run the ball on 2nd and long this past year, doubles your chances of facing a 3rd down. Basically cuts your chances of getting a first down in half. Which I don't know if you know this, but like that's the goal of the game. So maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll see Mike Mularkey next year. He's going to show up just totally redone. He'll look like Ben McAdoo next year.
The Titans, much like they were against the Chiefs last week, will actually be the guy she told you not to worry about.
Yeah, and then when you lose your fastball and she steals, whatever. But no, the Tennessee is like an up and coming spot. I've heard fantastic things about it. Mike Mularkey's going to realize he's in an up and coming place. He's going to get a haircut. He's going to dump the khakis. It's going to be crazy.
He's going to figure out the sideburns.
He's going to realize that Marcus Mariota could be a viable quarterback if you run routes and ask him to throw the ball. Anyways, new year, new me. First segment. I like it. Maybe we'll keep it.
Plus 0.5.
Yeah, decent. All right. Don't have any sponsors to cut this up at the moment, so we're just going to move seamlessly on to the next segment. They're coming, though. Don't worry. Next thing that we want to do is have a segment each week where we start to peel back kind of the layers of the onion a little bit. I think that makes sense to sort of talk about the inner workings of our model, or different models that we have, and sort of how we think and talk about football, at least from a predictive standpoint. Eric, I think it probably makes sense to start with the PFFELO rankings. We've been writing, you've been doing the majority of that, writing about them this year, and it's gotten great reception, as long as you're not a Lions fan, I guess. So take us through it. PFFELO. I'll pretend that I have no idea what it is, and I'll see if I can understand it here.
Yeah, I think, you and I and other people kind of in the analytics community for a long time have had a lot of respect for 538. And 538, what I like most about them is they're public about their predictions, they're accountable about their predictions, and they talk about the limitations of them. And so, last season when I was doing spread picks, I was always kind of sort of looking at them as a standard, like how are they doing? And then as I realized that they, I really did like their ELO model, I sort of dug deeper into it and found that it was actually a relatively simple system. It just used points for and points against in an iterative way to assign value to teams based upon how they did versus expectation versus a given team. Yeah. And like a lot of things, I thought, well, points for and against are great, but couldn't you just use PFF grades? Could you use PFF grades to make this model better? And so, myself, George, Nathan, we kind of like went to the drawing board and said, okay, how are we going to take PFF grades and map them to what the outcome of the game, quote unquote, should have been? Then we can use that and create an ELO system very similar to 538's, but using PFF centric data instead of outcome based points for and against.
Yeah, and it just takes the data that we get from how a team's graded and adds that level of expectation, still using grades to kind of make that, to set that bar. And so I think we really benefit from it in a couple of different ways. And It's awesome. It's such an intuitive idea. You watch a game of football, and people are going to get mad at you, by the way, because you said should have won the game. So obviously, any team that wins a game should have won the game. You got to know that they played harder. But I mean, you see this all the time. You're like, and I think it happens actually a lot in soccer too, because it's such a low-scoring game. You have a team that plays better, but because a scoring play is so important to the eventual outcome, things that are fluky, they impact the game more than they should, and sometimes that doesn't give you an accurate representation of how well that team has played. If you just look at the points, and so. It's great. It's awesome. I love it. You did a wonderful job. This was your brainchild. So it really, I think, informs the way that we, every conversation that we have, I think it owes a lot of the themes to the things that we've learned from PFFELO. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think, like, for example, one of the discussions we were having internally at PFF, but also kind of on Twitter and things like that, is like we were rating the Lions so low. And the one example that people had was that Detroit, was 2-0, and they were at home against Atlanta. And Detroit gave up scored a touchdown near the end, and then it got reversed, and Atlanta came out of with a win. And people are saying, well, Detroit's quote unquote one play away from being a 3-0 team. And so we look back and say, okay, but Detroit played poorly that game. They were beneficiary of 3 Atlanta turnovers, right? They had a vigorous comeback. They played well in one quarter of that game, and the game ended up the way it should have by luck, right at the end, sort of thing. And so if you look at that game was a 3-4 point game. Our PFF Elo system actually said Atlanta should have won that game by 6 or 7 points. And so what we're doing is we're saying, no, let's not overreact to a few plays of Detroit's game and make them out to be something that they're not. And what ended up happening is obviously Detroit regressed sort of to more the team that we thought they were the entire season. And some places
and Atlanta. Let's make sure we toot our own horn here.
Yes. And Atlanta, a team our analytics have loved all year, ended up, not only winning a playoff game on the road, which is not that unusual, but now is the first team to be favored against a 1 seed in the history of the NFL in the divisional round of the playoffs. So I think now the market's sort of finally correcting to our Atlanta take. And the Detroit take is a little less so because not that many people like the Lions, but
well, in fairness, Nick Foles has not been favored to do a single thing, whether it's on a football field or off, for the past 2 weeks. So
man, that's a projection if I've ever seen one. And then another example of something interesting is just, there was a game in Week 10 versus the Chargers and the Jaguars.
That's a good one.
The Jaguars played pretty poorly all game, a lot of turnovers by Blake Bortles and things like that. And for like a random fumble by Austin Eckler and sort of, I think, an interception or something in overtime, Jacksonville ends up winning that game. And our model actually had the Chargers winning that game by a point or two. And so, that's like not trivial because, the Chargers missed the playoffs by a tiebreaker. And so if, even the teams that end up in the playoffs, it's sort of this luck of the draw, and we're going to look at the Chargers season this year as not very successful, but in reality, if you look at the metrics, they've had a pretty decent season. It just didn't for a few reasons, whether it be their kicking game or this particular game or just playing poorly in one game against Kansas City. We're going to look at their season a lot more differently than we might have had to otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I got to correct you, though, because you said have conversations on Twitter. In fairness, you just go on Twitter to watch the world burn. There are no good conversations to be had. But we do have this conversation internally a lot, and it's a really profitable one because you end up weighing a team's performance in a much sounder way. These people that are complaining about, I only care about wins and losses. Well, what makes up your wins and losses, man? Like, you got to, use your brain a little bit and just think about it logically, and you all of a sudden come to the conclusion that I would way rather know how a team is playing on a play-by-play basis than just getting, the results of a handful of plays when I look at the score or watch a game. So it's pretty cool. And I think the other thing, I know we said we wouldn't ramble, but this is an important, piece that comes out of ELO, is understanding the parts of a football game that we need to care about more so than others, and passing jumps to the forefront of that sort of, with apps of importance. And I think that's really counter to what, I don't know what you listen to, but everything I listen to tells me you got to run the ball
And stop the run.
and stop. You literally can't. You can't even be a football team unless you do that. But I think here, so I've got an analogy. I'm going to test it out on you. Here's what I think. Basketball has made this transition where successful teams now shoot threes at a much higher rate and do so much better. And it came about because a guy who could count and do multiplication, Daryl Morey, I say that sarcastically because he's really smart, but like these guys realize you can get so much more out of shooting threes if you can shoot them decently well. And it doesn't mean that you never shoot 2-pointers anymore, right? It's still an efficient play when you do it in the right way, but the 3-point shot is just better. And I think passing is that. Passing is a 3-point shot. Doesn't mean you should never run, and you can be really successful running at the right time, but I don't know. What do you think? A+? I thought it was really good. I was really proud of that.
That's a really good analogy. And yeah, and it doesn't mean that you go out of your way to be bad at shooting 2-pointers or running the football.
Right.
Or hey, I'm talking to you, the Chiefs, stopping the run, right? But at the same time, like the reason that, for example, the Titans won last week was because their quarterback finally started to deliver, passes from a clean pocket, right?
To himself.
Not only to himself, but to guys like Delaney Walker and Eric Decker and things like that. That's why the game turned, because the Chiefs had to respect both parts of the game, and and there was a couple high variance run plays that happened. And like you said, doing mathematical modeling is a very hierarchical thing. And so you do something, a broad power number like this is a huge first order foundation. And then from there you say, okay, let's dig deep into the machine learning algorithm and say, okay, what are the most important variables? And that's where you look to sharpen models, right?
Yeah.
So we see quarterback, folks that catch the ball, folks that cover on the back end of a defense. Those are the most important variables. Okay, so then when we're looking at an ELO system that's backward looking and a team loses a player like Carson Wentz to an injury, we know that we have to adjust our methods to incorporate Nick Foles. If a team loses their third linebacker in the base defense, we probably don't have to take the time and add the noise to add more aspects to our model.
Yeah,
and so
granted,
that's kind
no one's doing that though. No one's taking out the third linebacker. Come on. But the point, I didn't mean to be rude there, but the point that you're making is very sound. I think like a running back is a great example of that, right? You see people overreacting to Leonard Fournette getting injured. I don't remember what week that was.
The Cincinnati Jacksonville game where
yeah, it's
everybody
like,
on Twitter was...
Leonard Fournette is out. I'm so shrewd because I'm betting based on that advice. And it's like, man, I mean, you can pick, that's why that pick was so awful and horrible at the time, is because you can find a really productive running back in the passing game and the running game.
You were paying one millions of dollars on your team already. Yeah, and you had put a second round pick into one 2 years ago. Yeah, I agree with
Brutal.
you. And so it even comes up like we, for example, in our models do not adjust for personnel in the running game. It's baked into the PFFELO system, but we, it's a good example of something that we do not want our model to be sensitive to something that doesn't matter all that much. And frankly, we can't predict as well as we can predict other things.
It does not matter as much. We're going to get so many angry, well, I don't know if they're still listening because of your math jokes, but if they are, they're going to be really, really angry about your hatred for the run game. All right, that was our deep dive behind the scenes PFF analytics team segment. What a great name. Wonderful name. All right, so next segment. So it's the time that we're all been waiting for, probably the reason that anyone is listening to this podcast. Want to get into this week's slate of games. The playoffs have been pretty good. People rag on how crappy NFL football is, which is ridiculous. Just watch a bowl game. But these playoff games have been pretty good, and we're going to get into all of the games. Usually we won't give away all the games because we want you to buy a PFF Elite subscription, obviously. But because of the playoffs, Eric, I feel like it's the least we could do. So we're going to hit them all real quick, and then we're going to get to our lock of the week. Sound good?
I mean, I'm excited.
So let's do this. For each game, let's focus in on a key matchup here, and give a little bit of insight into why we think that's a good matchup. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, Dan Quinn, have your dry fits ready. Atlanta +3 in Philadelphia, over under 41.5. The model, kind of ambivalent, not surprisingly, because Atlanta a road favorite. So no pick on this game, at least for the spread. Big matchup here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a classic example of where our model would have liked Atlanta had the public not been so overreacting to the last game.
The bandwagon, it's not even full. It's been like buried under a mountain of people. It's ridiculous.
But then it just like rose up and people just jumped on it all in 1 week. So our model is pretty much the same number. We do shade it a little bit over with the 41.5 being a little low. Atlanta's been kind of an under team most of the season, but most of their over-unders have been things like 49, 47 and stuff like that. So we shade a little over there, a decent amount of value. The place where Philadelphia could kind of, make this a game is their running game against a smallish Atlanta defense. But what do we know about running games?
No. You almost got me there. I almost had a heart attack. I was like, what are you talking about? No, absolutely not. Okay, I've regained consciousness now. You can now tell me what you think the key matchup is.
Well, I was just trolling you there. Okay, so anyway, so we know that the passing game is going to be the main thing, and if Atlanta's going to win, it's going to be because Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and company are able to play well against a pretty tough Eagles defense. And where the matchup could go wrong for Atlanta is their offensive line, which is missing a couple guards, against the Fletcher Coxes and the Timmy Jernigans of the world in the Eagles pass rush. And so I think if Philadelphia wants to win this game, it's going to have to be pretty far underneath the total, and their defense is going to have to really slow down Atlanta's offense and hope for some of the unstable things that have thwarted Atlanta's offense in the past, like the red zone and kicking field goals and things like that.
Kicking field goals, yum. Just a turnover with the participation trophy. I don't. The only thing that I'm going to add here is the D line is so good for Philly. They don't need to blitz a whole lot, and traditionally that's where Matt Ryan has just killed teams. He's got the best pass rating against the blitz over the past 2 years. So their ability to get pressure without blitzing, I think is going to be the key matchup. Next game, rolling on to the Saturday night game, which is everyone's favorite team, the New England Patriots. They're at home. No one can stop talking about the Patriots, and they are bringing in the Tennessee Titans. It's 13.5. Enormous, way too many points. False. Our model currently likes New England, actually. So what do you think? Ridiculous, or does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty ambivalent on the total, by the way. But yeah, New England, we like them about a 14-point to 15-point spread there. What I really like about our model so far this season, it's been able to, when the teams are as differentiated as they are here, New England being the first team in our ELO system, Tennessee still at 17th in our ELO system, it's been able to separate them and say, this spread is not too big in situations like this.
Can you give me, sorry to cut you off, can you remember a time, maybe to jog some people's memories here? I'm not trying to brag about myself, but if I come up in the story, maybe you could mention it.
Well, I had a friend once who had another friend, and they picked games for the Super Contest, and my one friend, he may or may not be talking on the podcast currently, liked New England at minus, 16.5 against the Dolphins with Matt Moore earlier in the season.
Lock it up.
And we decided to make it the lock of the week. We were correct. Even though New England gave up a defensive touchdown and otherwise did not play well in that game, they still covered 16.5 points. And George, sorry,
you've given it away.
There. George won a steak dinner from his friend who would not take it for the Super Contest, and promised George a payout should New England had covered that enormous spread. So good job, George.
Thanks for reopening the being third in the Super Contest most of the season and then blowing it at the end. I really appreciate that. But yes, that is actually probably my proudest moment of the season. Just being so confident that um, that New England was actually better than what that huge spread said. It was the first huge spread of the season, and that in my mind made it less efficient. And as you said, New England did not play. They made a couple of really bad errors that they probably didn't make the rest of the season, and they still cover that spread. So here we're kind of using that again. Tennessee's defense, I think, is a little pumped up by their 32nd ranked opponent offense, at least by our metrics, schedule that they've faced. The Iron Chef, Marcus Mariota. I'm a little worried by the fact that he's got more interceptions from a clean pocket than any quarterback this year, and the fact that the Tennessee passing game isn't exactly scaring anyone. So
Yep. I think that all of those things are, and it could be even be, one of those things where New England, like last season against Houston in the playoffs, that was a 16-point spread. Houston similarly strong, I think, as Tennessee this year. New England did not play a good game in the divisional round last year and still easily covered that spread. So, I just think Tennessee is not a divisional round caliber team. New England is the best team in the NFL. So,
yeah, I'm excited to watch the Iron Chef cook in Gillette Stadium. Okay, you don't get my whatever.
I pretended to get it all year, and I.
How do you not you basically have to have like lived under a rock to have not watched Iron Chef, I feel like. That could be a product of the fact that I was homeschooled up until ninth grade. So I had like an inordinate opportunity to watch like unwatched television. But still, I feel like, anyways, I'm boring people. Boring you, most importantly. But we like New England. I think we may or may not write that up for our picks column, which you should check out at profootballfocus.com. Sunday, first game, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh. This is really like the passing of the torch game because everyone talks about how Blake Bortles is reminds them a lot of Ben Roethlisberger because they have sort of a round face and are white. It's hilarious. But
moderately tall man.
Yeah, moderately tall, can kind of like shed guys because they're big. Super similar. Anyways, this is a rematch of that blowout that happened in Pittsburgh when Jacksonville picked Ben off 5 times. Line still favors Pittsburgh. It is 7, at least at where I'm looking at it right now. And our model likes Pittsburgh to cover that over under 41. And our model likes the over. What do you think?
Yeah, I think weather could be an issue with that over, but
oh my God.
With Pittsburgh's strength,
Spare me, please. You have a trend? You have a trend on that? What about like the last 6 times going back to 1980 that Pittsburgh has played in bad weather?
You know what? Bobby Brister was good, okay? So you have to throw that out of the data.
Oh, man. They're brutal. I know I'll hear some good trends this weekend. Anyways, continue. Carry on.
Yeah, so, Pittsburgh's offense, since the game where Jacksonville intercepted Ben Roethlisberger 5 times, Big Ben has the highest passing grade among quarterbacks. Since that point in time, he's played fantastic. Antonio Brown is the best receiver in the NFL, and Le'Veon Bell was, I believe, first or second in the league in yards gained after contact on the ground. He caught more passes than any Pittsburgh running back in the history of their franchise, which seems crazy. And Juju Smith-Schuster is one of the best receivers in terms of yards per route run from the slot. And I think against the Jacksonville defense, they're ranked second in our metrics all season. Pretty good on the outside with Boye and Ramsey. The place to beat them might be in the middle. And I think Pittsburgh has more than enough horses to go toe-to-toe with the Jacksonville defense. And lastly, for the total, I think Pittsburgh's defense, without Ryan Shazier of late, has been, teams that have good offenses can move the ball against them. And so, Jacksonville might be able to get these, the 10 to 17 points that they're going to need for this to go over the 41.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that key matchup, I think there's maybe 2, but the one that I'm interested about is Pittsburgh, their offense looking to kind of attack maybe the middle of the field. Against the Jacksonville defense, and I'm not going to give it away, but I'm looking at our quarterback annual that just came out, and I'm just looking at Ben Roethlisberger's page, and I can see here how he did on in-breaking routes this season. So I'm fairly I'm emboldened a little bit by that. That makes me excited. Anyways, go check it out. You get it with an Edge subscription. It's ridiculous how good of a deal that is. Anyways, I like that as the key matchup, and I think you're spot on with the Pittsburgh defense kind of not being what it used to be. And look, Blake Bortles, what did he pass for? Like almost 100 yards the last time they played each other.
I mean, and this shows you the value of the running game. So Fournette was hardly anything against the Bills, but Bortles picked a pick earlier, was almost 100 yards on the ground. So what the real story of picking a running back at 4 is you should pick him at 3 instead.
And he should play quarterback as well. God, I'm so excited for Saquon Barkley, number 1 overall this year.
I'm here for it.
I can't wait. I'm a huge Niners fan, and people were yelling about, oh man, it sucks that they're down at like the 10th pick because they can't pick Saquon Barkley. And I was like, we have a smart GM and a smart head coach. We're not making that type of catastrophic, misvaluation. Not that Saquon Barkley won't be good, but there'll be a 3rd or 4th round running back that'll be basically the same. Alvin Kamara, just saying. Anyways, those were our sort of quick run through for the games. We need to get better at that, but I didn't think it was too terrible. It's time. It's time for the lock of the week. Ironically, the last game, we need a sponsor for the lock of the week. I feel like, I don't know who it would be. Do you have any ideas? I'm thinking maybe like lock of the week presented by christianmingle.com or something like that.
LifeLock, something.
Nothing says lock it up like christianmingle.com. Okay.
That mrsdegree.org. I don't. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that as well. So many options. We'll work on it. Anyways, Sans, a sponsor for the lock of the week. We carry on regardless. New Orleans, Minnesota. Very excited for this game. The line is now Minnesota by 5. Of course, they're at home. The total is at 46. For our lock of the week, we are riding with the Saints and Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara and co. Before we get there, as we usually do, though, let's hit them with the biggest thing that worries you here. I'll let you start it off.
Yeah, well, so we've talked about the Vikings fairly, a lot internally, and what the question has been, is Case Keenum what is the prior on Case Keenum? What is the data coming in saying on Case Keenum? And I think the data that's come in on Case Keenum has said he can play outlier games and he can have outlier situations. So, he's first, I think, in passer rating on plays outside the pocket. He hasn't turned the ball over. He has no turnover worthy plays in the red zone this year. His sack rate on dropbacks where he's pressured is second lowest in the league. And as we've measured, he has one of the best supporting casts in the passing game among all the teams in the league. So all of those things work in the Vikings' favor. And if Keenum plays a little bit better than he's been playing this season, he can more than keep up, I think, with Drew Brees. It's just and then you fold all that in with Minnesota's defense. Missing the third fewest tackles in the league. They're first in our metrics. They've allowed, as George told me before the podcast, the fewest yards per target to running backs. I mean, that's a pretty good football team. I think we're more concerned about the number, right?
Yeah, I think what you were trying to say there when you were rambling incoherently about Case Keenum, as many Minnesota fans want to do, is if he continues to play at this kind of ridiculous level. I think all those numbers you mentioned are outliers regardless of really who you are, like even if you're Aaron Rodgers. If he continues to have that type of outlier performance, then yes, I think Minnesota could run away with it, which is basically what this line, what it would take. But I mean, you make a great point. His big time throw percentage, I'm looking at the quarterback annual again, his big time throw percentage in the red zone, nearly 10%, which is about double the average. So he's made some really good throws in important situations, but he also has a guy like Stephon Diggs who has the highest catch rate on contested targets in the NFL. So guys making plays for him. If both those things happen, I would be, I guess, moderately worried, but it's a lock of the week, man. Like we got to be somewhat confident here, and we are. Just tell it to me again. What do we have here that is so exciting?
It's the better quarterback getting points.
Thank you. Preach. I want to get. I don't have a tattoo. I've thought about getting one. I think that's climbing up the ladder. It's like right behind something about field goals sucking, and some inspirational quote in a language that I don't understand.
The expected points on runs of 2nd and 6 or longer. George has got like minus 0.26 on his like elbow now.
Oh man, it's funny because I don't have tattoos I just mentioned, but my girlfriend has a couple that are they're small and dainty, of course. That's the only way you can get a tattoo. So when I bring it up, I have that. I can get one because she has one. It works in my favor. Anyways,
I'm not sure reciprocity in a relationship works that way, but let's go with it.
it's working. It's working great so far, as you can tell. Anyway, better quarterback being Drew Brees. Make that case, because I make that case. You see what I did there? Because there are probably people that you talk to a lot that are going to yell at you about it. So go ahead.
Right. So you brought up Case Keenum's passer rating or big time throw percentage in the red zone. Well, we know that red zone proficiency at the quarterback position is one of the least stable things that a quarterback does. Drew Brees, on the other hand, is second in the NFL in passer rating from a clean pocket, and we know.
Let me go to my quarterback annual here so I can follow along with you.
And
Drew Brees. Okay, go ahead.
And throwing from a clean pocket is one of, if not the most stable things a quarterback can do statistically. And another thing from that, so I know that the Saints have some difficulties offensively with injuries on the offensive line, but they kind of have the entire year, and they still lead all offensive lines in pass blocking efficiency by almost 2 percentage points. So there's something that the Saints are getting rid of the ball quickly. They're keeping Brees out of harm's way, and it seems to be relatively independent of the personnel that they put out there. And so they're going to put Brees in positions where we know how he's going to perform, and we know that he's going to perform at a better rate than Case Keenum. He's got the third best adjusted completion percentage on downfield throws, and in a game against a Vikings defense that is pretty good, they're going to need to hit on a few big plays.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just think to kind of dovetail back, this number was 3.5 early in the week. It's now 4.5, 5, and that's one of the things where I think the market loves the public loves favorites. They love home favorites, and I think if you really drill that down, that's just so much added value, especially when you have the quarterback differential that we have here.
Yeah, this game reminds me of our lock from last week, which was the Falcons, traveling to Los Angeles. They're on the road, but you can make the argument that they're the better team, and I think you just did so. A couple other things that I'll mention, like Alvin Kamara is a ridiculous weapon, right? The guy has forced more attempted tackles to miss than any other player in the NFL. 29 missed tackles on receptions, leads the NFL. So, I mean, he's a ridiculous weapon. Michael Thomas over the middle is going to be a great weapon. And, of course, you as you just mentioned, Drew Brees has been so efficient, throwing the ball. He has the lowest average depth of target in the NFL, and yet is one of the league leaders in yards per attempt. The most accurate quarterback in the NFL this year, and he's doing it really short, but when he goes long, he's also been successful. And I think the matchup that probably that we're not mentioning because of the quarterbacks being so important, but that could have an impact is Cam Jordan. This guy gets overlooked, I think, all the time, right? And we have mentioned passing and coverage, but when you do have that dominant pass rusher in a situation like this, it can obviously have a huge effect on the opponent's passing game. So that'd be one to watch.
Yeah, and I think the Vikings do have a compensatory pass rush on the other side, but what the Saints are going to do, I think, offensively is going to neutralize that pass rush a bit more than what the Vikings want to do, with Keenum holding onto the ball a little longer. Another thing to note is that the Vikings offensive line is kind of shifting a little bit with their Nick Easton being out. They're currently considering changes at left and right guard and right tackle. So that could be something, if it's an offensive line combination that's started for the first time all season, it may be good for Minnesota, but it also could be bad in terms of trying to stop the likes of Cam Jordan.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, Drew Brees from a clean pocket, getting this from my quarterback annual, by the way. Past 4 years, 112.2, 107.6, 108.3, 113.4. And he's kept clean more than any other quarterback in the NFL. So Do you think you can do the math there? Can you figure that out? Anyways, this I wanna ask you here because you are a Vikings fan. You root for the Vikings, and we got in an argument about if these two teams met. This is before the playoffs. Who would you expect to win? And I've been on the Saints bandwagon for a while. So I have a question for you. I've decided this is the question that's gonna get you to turn from thinking the Vikings have the best chance to win this game. What How much do the Vikings need to be winning by going into the fourth quarter for you to feel like you have a better than 50% chance of winning?
11. I mean,
okay,
because
11.
because I've seen it all. I've seen the Vikings were up 17-6 against the Cardinals. Like Josh McCown was the Cardinals quarterback, and Jim Kleinsasser drops an onside kick, and like the Vikings get kicked out of the playoffs in the last play. I obviously the 1998 NFC Championship game was on my 13th birthday. All they needed was a kicker who had not missed all year to make a field goal, and they didn't. And obviously,
Because you really need help making your 13th birthday more depressing.
Right. And in 2009, not only obviously did Favre throw that interception to Tracy Porter, but like on the opening kickoff of overtime, the Vikings starting cornerback tears his ACL, and then Drew Brees, probably from clean pockets, just dinkity dunks all over him, all the way to a Garrett Hartley game-winning field goal that ended up changing the rules in overtime, right? So
Yeah.
something's going to happen to there's a better chance than not that if the Vikings are going to win this game, it's not only going to be, it probably is going to be under 5 points in a win, but it's going to cause, my collection of dry fits to be obsolete by the time the game is over. So I come into this game fully aware.
Your purple dry fits. Okay, so I think that question helped solidify at least my view on this pick. I think it's really deserving of the lock of the week for what you just mentioned, which is both these teams are very good, just like we saw in last week's game. And if it's a close game, winning by 6 or more, that almost feels like a blowout to me. And with sort of the advantage I think the Saints have in the passing game from a quarterback perspective, I feel pretty good about it.
And our motto likes the Saints. There's also that.
Yeah, it should go without saying, by the way, that if we're taking something as a lock of the week, after I gave you that soliloquy on how we don't go on trends and gut feelings, that we would be siding with our model. We always side with the model. I think that's all we've got, man. Do you have anything else? I think we're going to spare any sort of Mike Renner bet for this first one. Because we're kind and it's a New Year's resolution, New Year, New Me. I'm going to be kinder to people. Yeah, that might work for like a week, but we'll see. Anyways, couple of things to keep in mind. We're going to do this weekly. We haven't quite nailed down a day yet, but stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the PFF Forecast, and if you want some of the other good stuff that we've got actually a really cool thing that you probably, if you aren't aware of, you must be living under a rock, which is our first quarterback annual. It's just a hair under 300 pages of stuff on quarterbacks. It's actually a ridiculous amount of information. And I wasn't kidding when I was scrolling through it while we were talking. You can get it with a PFF Edge subscription, which is like basically getting it for free. And there's some awesome articles. We have, 3 or 4 analytics articles in there. So if you want to learn more about what we're working on, Steve and Sam have a ridiculously good article on grading quarterback play. And then it's about 250 pages of everything you want to know about any quarterback. Each quarterback gets 6 full pages. It's pretty cool. So you excited? You gonna go check it out right now?
I'm jacked, man. And yeah, kudos to the people that put that together. George, you put a lot of work into it, and it's a really great thing. And I think, as we continue to peel back the layers of what PFF is saying to us, quarterback's obviously the most important. And so this is, just sort of scratching the surface on kind of all of the deep work that we've done to try to understand what wins football games and how quarterbacks contribute to it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So go check it out. And our column with our picks and terrible writing will be out probably when you're listening to this. So go get that too. Anyways, Eric, as usual,
Lock it up.
you too. See you guys later.